I never thought I would stand on my own land and feel like a stranger. But that was exactly what happened the day I came back after one long year away. The moment I walked up the hill toward my property, I froze like my feet were nailed to the ground. Because sitting right there, right on my land, were three giant white mansions, not small houses, not tiny cabins, huge, shining, fancy mansions with tall pillars, wide balconies, and driveways that looked like they were made of polished glass. And all three of them were filled with people in matching blue HOA shirts, walking in and out like they owned the place. One of them, a tall woman with sharp sunglasses and a voice that could cut glass, pointed at me and shouted, "Who is that man? Security, he shouldn't be here." My jaw dropped, my backpack slipped off my shoulder. Me not supposed to be here. I took one step forward, my heart banging in my chest. "This is my land," I said. "Who are you to tell me I can't be on my own property?" The woman laughed, actually laughed. "Well," she said, crossing her arms, "that's going to be a problem, because these homes, these mansions, this whole area, it now belongs to the Lakeshore HOA. My hands shook, my stomach twisted, my brain felt like it was flipping around like a washing machine. And before I could even say another word, 4 security guards started marching toward me. And that's when everything exploded into something even worse. But let me go back to the beginning, because this story didn't start with anger. It started with hope, kindness, and a decision that I thought would change my life in the best way. Before all of this happened, before the mansions, before the HOA, before the shock of finding strangers on my own land, I was just a tired man trying to fix his life. 1 year earlier, I had packed one single suitcase and left town for a volunteer job in a small village far away. I wanted to do something kind for once, something that didn't involve worrying about money or stress. My dad used to say, "Helping people makes your heart cleaner," and after the rough year I had, I wanted that more than anything. So I rented out my small house in the city and left my open land, the land my dad left me, to stay untouched until I returned. Nobody lived near it except trees, deer, and a lake that shined like a puddle of melted diamonds when the sun hit it. I told myself I would come back one day, fix up the land, and maybe build a simple cabin where I could start fresh. But that year away changed me in ways I didn't expect. I worked with children who had nothing but gave everything. I saw families share their food even when they didn't have enough. I met an old woman who walked miles every day just to help people get clean water. I learned that kindness can make even the weakest person strong. For the first time in my life, I felt proud of myself. But I also missed home, the quiet air, the lake, the land that held my dad's memories. So after 12 months, I packed my bag, hugged the people I'd grown close to, and took a long bus ride back, excited to start a new chapter of my life. I thought maybe the grass on my land would be taller, maybe some weeds would grow around the edges, maybe I'd have to clean up some fallen branches. But never, not even in my wildest dreams, did I think I would find mansions there. The shock started even before I reached the hill. As I walked down the road, I saw new signboards, bright ones with gold letters that said, "Welcome to Lakeshore View Estates, private property, HOA rules apply." I frowned. Lakeshore View Estates. Private property. Rules. Since when? Then I saw the new pavement, smooth and shiny like someone ironed the ground. There were new street lamps, new mailboxes, new fences, everything looked brand new. At first, I thought I was in the wrong neighborhood. I looked around, scratching my head, trying to match what I was seeing to the memory in my mind. But everything looked strange. Too shiny. Too controlled. Too HOA-like. But when I looked ahead, toward the hill where my land sat, I recognized the slope, the old oak tree, the rocky path. It was the same place. But now it had an iron gate around it, a tall one, with spikes. And behind the gate were the giant mansions. When I pushed the gate, it swung open like it was waiting for me. Everything inside my chest felt cold. That was when the HOA woman spotted me. And everything started to fall apart. After the volunteers' kindness I had seen during the year, I walked onto my land expecting peace, not a fight. So when the security guards walked toward me, I tried to stay calm. My dad always said, "Anger makes you blind," and right then I needed to see clearly. "What's going on?" I asked them. This place belongs to me. I have the deed. I inherited it." The guards didn't stop walking. The HOA woman shouted again, "Remove him from the premises." Premises. My stomach twisted again. I stepped back, raising my hands. "Listen," I said, "I think you are all mistaken. Let's not make this a fight. I'm sure we can talk." But I didn't get to finish. A loud engine roared behind me. I turned around and saw a long black SUV speeding up the hill, kicking dust into the air. It screeched to a stop right beside me, and the back door opened slowly. A man stepped out, tall, serious, wearing a suit even though it was boiling hot outside. He carried a stack of papers and walked like a person who had never been told no in his life. He didn't look angry. He looked confident. Too confident. "Ah," he said with a smile, "you must be the former owner." Former. I felt my knees wobble. "I think there's a misunderstanding," I said. "I didn't sell this land." "Oh, I know," he said lightly. "You didn't. But you see, the HOA voted and the city approved our expansion. Your land was reallocated." My heart almost stopped. Reallocated? What does that even mean? I shouted. "This is MY land, you can't just take it." He held up his hand. "Oh, but we can," he said calmly, and we did. Then he snapped his fingers. And the guards grabbed me. That was when the real extreme event of Chapter 1 happened. Because right as they held onto my arms, dragging me backward, the man leaned in close and whispered, "And before you try anything, you should know we already started collecting rent from the mansion owners." I stared at him. "Rent from houses built on my land?" "Yes," he said with a proud smile, "but don't worry, you'll learn everything soon." Then he nodded to the guards. "Take him to the office, we'll sort this out." And as they pulled me toward the SUV, a loud scream came from the mansion behind us. A woman shouting for help. Something had gone terribly wrong inside the mansion, and the guards suddenly let go of me and turned toward the noise. "Where are you watching from?" I froze for a moment, my mind spinning faster than the leaves blowing in the wind. The scream came again, louder this time, sharp and panicked. It wasn't a playful yell or someone calling for a friend, it was fear. Pure, raw fear. I glanced toward the nearest mansion. Through the tall windows, I could see shadows moving frantically. Someone was inside, and they were in trouble. The HOA guards and the suited man hesitated. Their perfect calm demeanor cracked just slightly as they exchanged glances. But before anyone could react, I found myself moving forward, almost on instinct. My dad had always told me, kindness is courage in action. I didn't know if it was bravery or stupidity, but I couldn't just stand there. I sprinted toward the mansion. The guards shouted, telling me to stop, that it was dangerous, but I didn't care. The front door was slightly open, and I pushed it the rest of the way. Inside, the grandeur of the mansion hit me. Gold trim along the walls, marble floors, expensive chandeliers swaying slightly, and yet chaos filled every corner. A small boy, maybe 8 years old, was trapped behind a fallen dining table, crying, his little hands reaching out for help. "Hey, I've got you," I shouted. I lunged forward, lifted the table with all my strength, and helped him to his feet. He clung to me like I was the only safe thing in the world. I could hear the footsteps of the mansion's residents behind me, shouting in panic, trying to get everyone out. And then I saw her, a woman tall and elegant, tangled in a decorative curtain. She was struggling to free herself, her heels slipping across the marble floor. Without thinking, I dashed to her side. "Grab my hand," I yelled, and she did. Together we pulled, tugged, and finally freed her from the curtain's hold. Her face was pale, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Once she was safe, I stepped back and looked around. The mansion was in complete disarray, vases shattered, furniture overturned, and papers scattered like leaves in a storm. I didn't understand what had happened, but it was clear that something inside had gone terribly wrong. Before I could ask, the suited man appeared at the doorway. His eyes were wide, his usual calm replaced with concern. "What happened?" he demanded. "I don't know," I shouted. "Something exploded inside. People are trapped." He hesitated, then he barked orders to the guards. "Check everyone, make sure no one is hurt." The guards ran into the mansion, moving quickly but carefully, while I stayed outside with the children and the woman. She looked at me, trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my son and me." I smiled faintly, trying to hide the fear creeping into my chest. "It's okay, everyone deserves to be safe." The suited man returned, his expression unreadable. "I will handle this," he said, almost reluctantly. "You shouldn't have come in, it's dangerous." I shook my head. I couldn't just stand there, someone needed help. He studied me for a long moment, then finally nodded. Perhaps you have more courage than I assumed." That was when the less extreme event of the chapter occurred. After the initial chaos, the mansion's residents were all accounted for. Minor injuries, some shock, but nothing permanent. Children were reunited with parents, and the woman I had helped smiled weakly. "I never thought anyone would come in to help," she said softly. Her words sank deep into my heart. The suited man approached me again. "Since you seem invested, maybe we should talk." And that's when the shocking twist happened. A loud crash erupted from the second mansion. It was louder than anything I'd heard before. Windows shattered, wood splintered, and a cloud of dust poured out like a grey wave. The HOA guards ran toward it, shouting warnings, but I didn't move. My legs felt rooted to the ground, my chest tight with dread. The suited man turned, his face pale. That wasn't supposed to happen. I squinted through the dust. Shapes were moving inside, but I couldn't see clearly. My heart pounded. Something about this felt intentional, calculated, almost like the mansions weren't just built on my land, they were a trap. And then a scream tore through the air. Not a cry for help like before. This one was louder, sharper, and filled with terror. The suited man grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Stay here, do not go in." But I couldn't stay. My father's words echoed in my mind. Kindness is courage in action. The children, the trapped residents, it wasn't about land or deeds anymore. It was about doing what was right. I took a deep breath, looked at the mansions rising arrogantly on what used to be my peaceful land, and stepped forward. The guards yelled, the suited man shouted, but I moved anyway. That's when the chapter ended, right in the middle of chaos. The second mansion's roof began to crumble, massive beams breaking free, sending splinters flying into the air. I froze, watching as the disaster unfolded, unsure if anyone inside would make it out alive. And in that moment, I realized this was no ordinary HOA dispute. This was something far bigger, something that would change everything about my life and the land I thought I knew. The moment the roof of the second mansion started to collapse, my stomach dropped. I felt frozen, yet my legs moved forward, dragging me closer despite the danger. Dust and splinters filled the air, making it hard to see, and the screams inside echoed like a chorus of panic. I could hear children crying, women shouting, and the occasional crash of falling beams. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I had already helped once. I couldn't turn my back now. I scanned the entrance. The door was slightly open, swinging violently with the gusts of air caused by the chaos. Through the cloud of dust, I could see two small figures struggling under what appeared to be a fallen balcony railing. My heart clenched. I sprinted, dodging splintered wood and shattered glass. "Hold on, I'm coming," I shouted, my voice nearly lost in the storm of noise. I reached the children, two sisters, maybe 7 and 9, trapped under the railing. Their small hands clawed at the wood, faces streaked with dirt and tears. I crouched beside them, placing my shoulder under the railing, and pushed with every ounce of strength I had. The railing finally gave way with a sickening crack, and I pulled them free. Their eyes were wide with terror, but I whispered, "It's okay, you're safe now." As we ran toward the mansion exit, I heard another shout, this one from a man, a contractor or a resident, I wasn't sure. He was pinned beneath a pile of furniture near the staircase. I froze for a moment, weighing the danger. The structure could collapse further at any second, but I couldn't leave him. Courage, I reminded myself, kindness is courage. I rushed over, shifting broken chairs and small beams, finally freeing him. He was gasping, covered in dust, but alive. "Thank you," he wheezed. "I didn't think anyone would come." But I didn't respond. There was no time. The mansion was groaning ominously, like it was alive and angry. The floorboards above me creaked dangerously, and I realized we had seconds to escape. I grabbed the children's hands and the man's arm, and we ran toward the entrance. Outside, the air was filled with smoke, dust, and the acrid smell of burning wood. The first mansion's residents had gathered, staring in shock, while the suited man barked orders, trying to organize the chaos. But I could see the panic in his eyes. Even someone so confident couldn't control this disaster. The children clung to me, shivering and coughing. The man I had saved collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. I knelt beside him, trying to calm him. The suited man approached, flanked by 2 guards. You went in," he said, disbelief and anger mixed in his tone. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" Yes, I said quietly, I knew it, and I went anyway, someone needed help. He looked at me, studying my face, as if trying to decide whether I was foolish or brave. Then he shook his head and muttered, unbelievable. Before I could respond, another loud crash echoed behind us. My eyes went toward the third mansion. A massive section of its balcony had collapsed onto the front lawn, sending debris flying everywhere. People screamed, scattering in panic. Dust and fragments of wood rained down like a storm. The HOA guards tried to hold back residents, but chaos was spreading fast. I realized that this wasn't an accident anymore. Something about these mansions, the way they were built, the way they seemed to collapse one by one, felt deliberate. I looked at the suited man. His face was pale now, no longer the confident smirk I remembered. I started, but he cut me off. No, he said quickly, too quickly. It wasn't us. We didn't plan this. It must be a structural issue. I didn't believe him. My gut told me otherwise. The speed and timing of the disasters were too perfect, too coordinated. Someone wanted these mansions to fail, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The children were still clinging to me, trembling. The man I had rescued leaned against me, exhausted and coughing. I scanned the area, realizing that the first mansion, the second, and now the third, all had serious damage. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, I felt a strange sense of purpose. I had chosen to act, to help, to be kind, and that courage had saved lives. But then, the most extreme event of Chapter 3 occurred. A massive beam from the collapsing balcony of the third mansion broke free and hurtled toward us. I barely had time to shout, "Move!" before it landed just behind us, smashing into the ground with a thunderous crack. Dust and debris exploded into the air, and I felt the shockwave through my chest. The ground shook, and I realized how close we had come to being crushed. The suited man screamed for everyone to get back, but I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the wreckage. My heart was pounding. I had faced danger before, but nothing like this. And yet, as terrifying as it was, a strange calm settled over me. We had survived. We were alive. And maybe, just maybe, the chaos around us had a lesson hidden inside it. About courage, about helping others, about standing firm even when the world seems to be falling apart. The guards and residents began to regroup, assessing the damage, checking for injuries. But my mind was racing. Whoever had designed these mansions, or whoever had tampered with them, was clever and dangerous. And I realized, with a mix of fear and determination, that my fight for my land was far from over. And that's where Chapter 3 ends. The smoke was rising, the mansions were broken but still standing, and I knew that this was just the beginning of something much larger than a property dispute. The suited man's eyes followed me, wary now, perhaps even respecting me, but the question remained, what would happen next? The smoke hung heavy over the three mansions, curling like ghostly fingers against the morning sun. I could still feel the tremor from the falling beam in my chest, my arms sore from hauling children and furniture out of collapsing buildings. People were scattered across the lawn, shaken, coughing, and staring at the destruction with wide eyes. For a moment, the whole scene felt unreal, like I had stepped into a nightmare that no one else could escape. I knelt beside the children, brushing dust from their hair. They clung to me silently, too scared to speak. I could feel the tension in their tiny bodies, the way their hearts were racing just like mine. I whispered gently, "It's okay now, you're safe, I promise." They nodded weakly, but I could tell the fear was still clinging to them like a shadow. The suited man approached again, flanked by two guards. His expression had hardened, but there was something else there too, hesitation, perhaps even fear. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes scanning me like he was trying to figure out if I was a threat or an ally. "You keep putting yourself in danger," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Do you understand what could have happened? You could have been killed." "I understand," I replied calmly, "and I still would have done it, because someone needed help. That's what matters." He stared at me, his jaw tight. Then he gestured to the debris. "Look at this. Do you have any idea how much money these homes represent? They're insured, yes, but the reconstruction alone will cost millions, and all of it could have been avoided if you had just stayed away." I shook my head. "It's not about money, it's about people." The suited man's gaze flickered over the crowd of shaken residents, the children clinging to parents, the women wiping tears from their eyes. He didn't say anything. For a few moments, there was silence, except for the creaking of unstable walls and the distant sound of emergency sirens approaching. Then a sudden shout pierced the air. "Help, someone get over here." I spun around and saw a man trapped under a broken stairwell in the first mansion. The stairwell had collapsed during the chaos, pinning him against the wall. Dust and splintered wood covered him, but he was conscious, his hands flailing. I didn't hesitate. I ran toward him, dodging falling beams and shattered glass. The suited man tried to stop me, but I waved him off. I had to save him. It didn't matter that the mansions weren't mine anymore, or that the HOA could sue me. Right now, saving someone's life was the only thing that mattered. With the help of two other residents, I lifted the heavy debris just enough for the man to crawl free. He collapsed on the grass, coughing and gasping for air. I patted his back. "You're okay, you're safe now," I said. He looked at me with wide, grateful eyes, and I felt a warmth spread through me despite the chaos surrounding us. The less extreme event of this chapter occurred as emergency crews arrived. Firefighters and paramedics swarmed the scene, taking control of the situation. They guided residents away from the dangerous areas, tended to minor injuries, and began assessing the structural damage to the mansions. The smoke began to clear slightly, revealing the full extent of the destruction. Broken windows, shattered pillars, and splintered wood told the story of how close we had come to disaster. The suited man approached me again, this time with a clipboard in hand. "You saved lives today," he said reluctantly. "I'll give you that, but you're meddling in something bigger than you realize. These homes are not just built on your land. They're part of a larger project, approved at levels you couldn't even imagine." I frowned. "Larger project, what do you mean?" He hesitated. "There are contracts, agreements, people invested millions. If anything had happened to these residents, there could have been lawsuits, fines, even criminal charges. You don't understand the consequences of your actions." "I understand consequences," I replied firmly, "but I also understand that helping people is more important than paperwork or money." For a moment he was silent, then he nodded slowly, almost grudgingly. Perhaps you have a point." But before I could respond, the most extreme event of Chapter 4 occurred. A sudden, deafening roar came from the hill behind the mansions. I turned just in time to see a massive tree, weakened by the construction and the chaos, beginning to topple. Its thick trunk cracked loudly as it leaned toward the third mansion. Residents screamed, scattering in every direction. I sprinted toward the falling tree, my heart hammering. The children from before were still nearby, and I had to make sure they were safe. With a burst of energy, I grabbed their hands and pulled them back just as the tree crashed onto the lawn, splintering into hundreds of jagged pieces. Dust and wood fragments filled the air, and the sound of breaking branches echoed like thunder. The suited man shouted for everyone to get back, but I stayed close to the children, calming them as best I could. The destruction was terrifying, yet a strange clarity settled over me. This land, these mansions, the chaos, it all showed one thing clearly: people's lives mattered more than buildings, contracts, or HOA rules, and I had chosen to stand up for that, even when it meant risking my own life. The emergency crews now had to navigate the aftermath of the falling tree, helping residents and securing the area. I looked around at the chaos, the broken mansions, and the terrified people, and for the first time, I realized that this fight wasn't just about land or HOA disputes anymore. It was about courage, empathy, and standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. And that's where Chapter 4 ends. The smoke had lifted slightly, the destruction was clear, and I knew the events of the day were only the beginning. The suited man's eyes followed me with a mixture of caution and respect, but I could sense that neither of us had yet seen the full scope of what was coming. The sun was beginning to set behind the trees, casting long shadows over the broken mansions and shattered lawns. Dust still hung in the air, mixing with the acrid smell of splintered wood and scorched grass. I stood in the middle of my land, my property, and for the first time in a long while, I felt both the weight and the strange thrill of what had happened. The HOA suits, the guards, and even the residents were scrambling, trying to organize themselves after the chaos. Emergency crews had barricaded the more dangerous areas, but I could still feel the tension lingering like static electricity before a storm. I glanced at the suited man. His usual confidence had been replaced by a tight-lipped seriousness. He seemed torn between frustration, fear, and somewhere deep inside, acknowledgement of what I had done. For all his money and authority, he couldn't control the unpredictability that had erupted here. "Are you okay?" he asked cautiously, as if the words themselves might set off another disaster. "I'm fine," I replied, brushing dust from my shirt. "It's the people I'm worried about, and the land." He frowned. "The land, what do you mean?" I pointed toward the mansions, now crumbling and unstable. "This is my land. You built on it without permission. Lives were at risk because of that. And yet, somehow, it feels like the land itself is fighting back. It's reminding us that people come first." He was silent for a moment, studying me with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Then he nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. "You have a strange way of looking at things." I smiled faintly. "It's called empathy, something money and rules can't buy." For a while the chaos slowed. Residents were being guided to safe areas, children reunited with parents, and the emergency crews worked to stabilize the damaged structures. I found a moment to breathe, leaning against what remained of a broken fence. My legs were sore, my hands raw from hauling debris, but the exhaustion felt strangely satisfying. I had faced danger head-on, and people were alive because of it. The less extreme event of this chapter began when I noticed a small group of residents huddled together, staring at me with a mixture of fear and gratitude. Among them was the woman I had helped earlier, holding her child close. She approached cautiously. I don't know your name," she said softly, "but you saved my family. I don't know how to thank you." I shook my head. "You don't need to thank me, you just need to stay safe." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and then glanced toward the suited man. "Why isn't he stopping you?" she asked. "Why isn't anyone trying to make you leave?" I looked at him. He was still watching, his arms crossed. The faintest flicker of respect crossed his face, though he would never admit it. "Because sometimes," I said, "doing the right thing doesn't follow the rules." She smiled weakly, and I felt a warmth spread through me despite the wreckage surrounding us. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, acts of kindness could shine brighter than fear or destruction. But that calm didn't last long. The extreme event of Chapter 5 struck suddenly. From the hill behind the third mansion, a loud rumble echoed through the valley. I spun around just in time to see another massive tree, this one far larger than the last, begin to topple toward the remaining structures. Its roots had been loosened by recent construction, and the ground beneath it cracked ominously. Residents screamed and scattered in every direction, emergency crews shouted warnings, and I felt my heart leap into my throat. Without hesitation, I ran toward the danger, my legs pumping as adrenaline surged. Children and terrified adults were frozen in place, unsure of where to go. I grabbed the nearest family, a mother and her 2 children, and pulled them to safety, shielding them with my body as the tree's massive trunk crashed into the lawn behind us. Splinters flew in every direction, and the ground shook beneath my feet. The suited man shouted at me to stay back, but I didn't listen. My mind was focused entirely on keeping people safe. Each step, each action felt instinctive, guided by the years of lessons I had learned about courage and empathy. The chaos around me blurred, leaving only the immediate task: protect those who could not protect themselves. Once the family was safe, I stood for a moment, catching my breath, watching as the emergency crews worked tirelessly to secure the area. The mansions were now in ruin, their once pristine facades reduced to splintered wood, shattered glass, and broken dreams. Yet amidst the devastation, there was a strange sense of order returning. People were alive. No one had been seriously injured. And somehow, against all odds, kindness had triumphed over chaos. But as I looked across the land, I realized something unsettling. The destruction wasn't random. It had a pattern, a timing that seemed deliberate. Someone had planned this, or at the very least, someone had made decisions that put lives at risk knowingly. My fists clenched as I considered the implications. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. It was a warning, a challenge, and perhaps even a test of how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine and what was right. And that's where Chapter 5 ends. The sun dipped lower, casting the shattered mansions in long, haunting shadows. The suited man and his guards regrouped, but I could see in their eyes that they were wary now. The land had spoken, and I had answered. But neither of us had yet seen the full story, and the next extreme event was waiting just beyond the horizon. I woke up to the sound of metal scraping against dirt. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, some weird noise that my half-asleep brain invented. But then I heard it again. A long, rough draggy, then a sharp clank. I sat up in bed, confused. It was 5:12 a.m., way too early for anyone to be doing yard work. I walked to the window, rubbed my eyes, and slowly pulled the curtain to the side. What I saw nearly made my heart stop. There was a deep ditch circling my house, a full ring, a trench, almost 2 feet wide and close to 3 feet deep, carved around my entire home like someone was trying to trap me in or trap something out. My porch light flickered onto a figure holding a shovel, a woman, short blonde hair, pink robe, furious expression, HOA Karen. She kept digging, muttering angrily to herself, and she wasn't alone. 2 other HOA board members I recognized stood nearby holding flashlights. They were digging a ditch around my home, at dawn, in secret. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that every angle of my property was covered by hidden cameras. Cameras that recorded their faces, their voices, their shovels, everything. And the last thing I saw before the feed froze was Karen glancing directly at my bedroom window, as if she knew exactly where I stood. Or worse, as if she planned something even bigger. But let me take you back to how all this started. Because this wasn't just about a ditch. It was about kindness, trust, and how dangerous someone becomes when they hate those things more than anything. Before things got crazy, life in Willow Creek Ranch Estates used to be peaceful, calm. I moved there because my wife, Emily, wanted a quiet place to raise our two kids, Luke, who was 9, and Emma, who was 7. The neighborhood had horses, fields, large open skis, and friendly neighbors who waved at each other while watering their lawns. At least, that's how things looked on the outside. On the inside, though, inside the HOA office, inside the rules no one read before signing the papers, inside the minds of the people who ran the place, there was trouble. The kind of trouble that comes wearing a bright smile and a clipboard. Her name was Karen Miller. Everyone just called her HOA Karen. She had the kind of power in the neighborhood that made grown adults nervous. She could fine people for having the wrong shade of beige paint on their mailbox. She could ban garden gnomes if she thought they were too cheerful. She once sent a violation notice to a man because his tree looked tired. But she loved one thing more than rules: control. And she hated one thing more than messy lawns: me. Why? Because from the first day we moved in, Emily insisted on kindness. Waving to neighbors, inviting kids over to play, giving out fresh apples from our small orchard. And the crazy part, other neighbors started doing the same. They smiled more. They visited each other. They shared tools, helped with chores, watched each other's kids. The entire neighborhood slowly became happier. Warm, friendly, except for Karen, because she believed happiness made people forget who was in charge. I still remember the first time she glared at me like I'd insulted her whole family. It was a warm summer afternoon, and we had just finished building a small wooden bench under the big oak tree in our yard. Emily put a sign on it: free to use, spread kindness. The kids helped paint hearts and small smiley faces on the wood. Neighbors loved it. They stopped by just to sit and chat. Kids sat there to read. One older man cried and said it reminded him of his late wife. But to Karen, it was a crime. She marched to my door the next day, red-faced and furious. "This bench," she said, poking it as if it were diseased, "is not approved by the HOA. You must remove it immediately." I asked her politely, "What rule does it break?" She froze, because she didn't know. It didn't break any rules, and she knew it. But she couldn't stand that something good existed without her permission. That day was the start. The spark. Karen watched us constantly after that. She fined us if leaves fell onto our yard too unevenly. She sent pictures of our kids' toys in the grass, calling them yard clutter. She even complained our dog breathed too loudly. But what she didn't know was that every time she tried to bring us down, someone else in the neighborhood stepped up to help. The bench. People repainted it when she scraped the paint off. The toys. Parents in the neighborhood started leaving toys out too. The dog. Neighbors brought their pets into our yard for playtime just to annoy her. Kindness grew bigger than her anger. And she hated that more than anything. But nothing made her snap harder than what happened in early spring. That was when she marched into our yard, pointed at our small barn, and announced, "You are violating HOA animal guidelines." She claimed our 3 chickens were livestock, even though the HOA rules clearly allowed them. Emily tried to reason with her. I tried to show her the printed rules. But Karen wasn't listening. Because the truth wasn't what she cared about. What she cared about was winning. A few days later, we received a notice saying our chickens had to be removed immediately, or we'd be fined $500 a day. But I wasn't going to let her bully us anymore. So I did something she never expected. I filed an appeal with the county, not the HOA. And I won. Karen was furious. Not just angry, furious. Her smile twitched. Her voice cracked. Her hands shook when she delivered the paperwork confirming we were right. And that was the moment I knew she wouldn't stop. Not ever. Not until she found a way to punish us. I just didn't know how far she would go. Not until the night the ditch appeared. But before we get there, let me tell you what happened the day before the digging began. It was a warm evening. The sun was setting, turning the sky orange and pink. Emily and I were grilling chicken for dinner while the kids played tag in the yard. It felt peaceful, too peaceful. Then I spotted Karen standing at the end of the street, arms crossed, staring at our house like she was planning something. When she saw me notice her, she turned away quickly and stormed off. That should have been my warning. But I didn't listen. I believed the cameras I'd installed months ago were enough protection. I believed she would limit herself to angry notes and rude comments. I didn't think she'd go this far. But just before 5 a.m. the next morning, she proved me wrong. So very wrong. Because that was when she and 2 HOA board members started digging around my house. In the dark. In secret. Like they were trying to trap us inside. Or make our home collapse. And just when I thought the morning couldn't get more shocking, Karen dropped her shovel, looked up at my window, and began walking toward my front door. Slowly, quietly, purposefully. And that's when something happened that changed everything. Something worse. Something unexpected. Something I never saw coming. Where are you watching from? I froze. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echo through the walls of the house. Karen was walking toward my front door, her pink robe swinging with each step, the early morning light catching the sharp anger in her eyes. Behind her, the 2 HOA board members hesitated, their flashlights bouncing across the yard like nervous fireflies. I ducked behind the windowsill and grabbed my phone. Not to call the police, not yet. I had to think carefully. I had already set up the cameras to record everything, every angle, every move, every word. And now, for the first time, that foresight felt like it was going to save my family. I whispered to Emily, "Stay calm, don't move, just watch." She grabbed the kids and moved them to the far side of the living room, trying to keep them quiet. Luke and Emma pressed their faces against the couch cushions, eyes wide, holding each other's hands. Karen stopped at the edge of the porch and glared up at our door, her lips tightening. I could almost hear her thinking, "I will make them pay for defying me." But then something unexpected happened. She hesitated. She looked down at the ditch she had helped dig, and then at the 2 board members standing stiffly behind her. Her confidence wavered. That pause, it gave me an idea. I quietly turned on the sprinkler system. One of the nozzles faced the ditch, spraying the loose dirt with a sudden burst of water. Mud splashed over Karen's shoes and the edge of the trench. She stumbled slightly and cursed, glaring at me through the window. "Nice try," she shouted, though her voice had lost a bit of its earlier menace. I smiled, though it was a nervous smile. I had no idea what she might do next, but I also knew I had to protect my family. I grabbed my binoculars and started recording the front yard live. Every second mattered. Karen looked around, clearly frustrated. She waved her hands at the board members. "Hurry up, finish this before he can call the cops," she snapped. I stayed silent. I didn't make a sound. I just watched as they both got back to shoveling, the trench now even messier with the mud from the sprinkler. Then something hit me, the kids. "Emily," I whispered, "get the kids' emergency backpacks, now." She didn't argue. She grabbed the small backpacks we had packed months ago with water, snacks, and flashlights. We had prepared for emergencies before, storms, power outages, but I never imagined we'd need them because of our HOA. Karen and the board members were too focused on the ditch to notice Emily quietly moving the kids into the garage. I held my breath as the sound of shovels scraping dirt filled the air. Every scrape made my stomach twist. Then the most shocking thing happened. Karen reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a can of spray paint. She had been marking the ditch's edges with bright orange lines. I couldn't believe my eyes. She wasn't just digging a ditch, she was planning something more permanent, something that would make it almost impossible for us to leave without difficulty. I quickly grabbed my laptop and opened the camera feeds. I zoomed in on Karen's face. Every sneer, every wrinkle of frustration, every flicker of madness was captured. The live footage was streaming directly to the cloud. If anything went wrong, I would have proof. But even as I watched, my heart sank. Karen suddenly looked up, scanning the yard with those sharp, calculating eyes. Her gaze landed on the small oak tree in our front yard, the one we had planted with the kids last year. That tree had grown fast. Its roots had spread just enough to make a small bump near the porch. Karen's eyes narrowed. She stomped toward it, pulling out the shovel again. I froze. Emily gasped behind me, Don't let her." But it was too late. Karen hit the ground near the tree roots with a forceful strike of her shovel. Dirt flew everywhere. The kids squealed. Luke jumped back, almost knocking over a chair. Emma hid behind her mother, clutching the backpack tightly. Karen was laughing now, but not a happy laugh, a cold, cruel laugh. "Let's see how much they love their tree," she muttered, digging faster, muttering to herself about rules and punishment. The board members didn't speak. They followed her orders silently, looking guilty but too afraid to intervene. And that's when I realized the truth. This wasn't about rules anymore. It wasn't about control. It was about fear. Karen wanted to scare us. She wanted to make a statement: "I can destroy what you love, and you can't stop me." I couldn't let that happen. I pressed a button on my phone that activated a motion-sensitive spotlight I had installed near the porch. The beam hit Karen full on. She shrieked and spun around, shielding her eyes. The board members tripped over the uneven dirt of the trench, stumbling and falling into the ditch themselves. For a moment, silence. Then Karen started screaming. Not the kind of yelling you do when angry. The kind of scream you do when something terrifying hits you in the middle of the morning and there's no one to help. I looked closer through the binoculars. Something in the ditch had shifted. A loose piece of metal, a hidden stake someone had left in the ground, punctured one of her boots. She yelped and almost fell completely into the ditch. I felt my stomach twist again. I wanted to run outside, but I knew if I did, she might attack. Then she glared at the house, yelling, "You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming next." Her threat hung in the air like smoke. I could feel it crawling under the skin. And at that moment, the worst possible sound came. The kids screamed. Not because they were hurt, but because they saw something at the edge of the yard, something moving, a shadow too big and too fast to be human. I didn't know what it was. I could barely breathe. Emily grabbed the kids, and I stayed by the window, gripping the binoculars, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Karen turned toward the shadow too, and that's when the extreme event happened. The shadow lunged at her, and everything went dark in my mind for a second. The shadow hit Karen with a sudden force that made her stumble backward into the ditch. She screamed, a high-pitched, panicked sound that cut through the morning air like a siren. The two HOA board members froze in terror, eyes wide as they realized they had no idea what had just attacked her. I couldn't see exactly what it was from the window, only that it was large, fast, and terrifyingly strong. My stomach turned. Every parent's instinct screamed at me, "Protect the kids." Emily pulled Luke and Emma close, whispering, "Stay behind me, don't look." The kids' hands were tight around hers, their small bodies trembling with fear. I grabbed the binoculars again and scanned the yard. The shadow had moved fast. It was over Karen now, pinning her down somehow, forcing her to flail and shout. The board members shouted, but their words were useless. They didn't know what to do. Then it hit me. Our neighbor, Mr. Collins, the retired firefighter, had been walking his dog near the edge of our property at dawn. His big German shepherd, Titan, had apparently spotted Karen digging earlier and had chased after her without anyone realizing. Titan was enormous and loyal to the people in our neighborhood who treated him well. He was a protective dog, a guardian in every sense. Karen tried to fight Titan off, swinging her arms and yelling, but the dog's grip was gentle enough to avoid real harm, yet forceful enough to immobilize her. Titan's growl was low and dangerous, a sound that made the board members take a step back. I could see Karen's face turn from anger to terror. She hadn't anticipated this, not at all. The board members finally regained some courage and tried to help her, but Titan backed them off with a low bark and a flash of his teeth. It was enough. The moment had shifted. The power dynamic that Karen had tried to create, her control over the neighborhood, her ability to intimidate, was gone in an instant. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my phone and started recording the live feed, streaming it to a private folder. Every word, every movement, every reaction was being captured. Evidence, proof, and maybe, just maybe, leverage. Karen shouted at Titan, "Get away, this is my property." She wasn't screaming at the dog. It was more like she was screaming at the universe for daring to defy her. Her pink robe was muddied now, dirt smeared across her face, and her hair stuck to her forehead in wet strands. The board members scrambled to pull her out of the ditch, but Titan wasn't backing down. Not until he saw me move. He looked up, tail wagging slightly, and backed a few steps. I took a deep breath and opened the front door cautiously, keeping my phone aimed at the yard. Titan stayed alert but let me step outside. Emily followed, holding the kids close, their eyes wide with fear and awe. The morning sunlight hit the yard, casting long shadows across the trench, the mud, and the disturbed grass. It looked like a battlefield, and in many ways it was. Karen finally managed to scramble out of the ditch, her pink robe ruined, her shoes caked in mud. She glared at me, spitting words through gritted teeth. You will pay for this." I stayed calm. "Karen, you were digging a ditch around my home at dawn. That's trespassing. You and your friends could have hurt my family. Titan was just doing his job." The board members looked embarrassed, mumbling apologies, but Karen wasn't interested in listening. Her eyes were wild, like a trapped animal, full of rage and disbelief. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You think you're smart? You think your little cameras are going to protect you? We'll see who wins in the end." I didn't respond. I just kept filming, capturing everything. Every angry shout, every muddy footstep, every flinch. It was all evidence, proof of the chaos she had caused. Titan barked again, reminding Karen and the board members that he was still watching, still in control of this corner of the yard. Karen finally backed off, muttering curses under her breath. She and the board members disappeared down the street, leaving behind the ditch, the mud, and the chaos they had caused. I let out a long breath and turned to Emily. She was pale but relieved. The kids were clinging to her, shaking slightly. "Are we safe now?" Luke asked quietly, his voice small. I nodded, "For now, but we need to stay vigilant. Karen isn't going to give up that easily." Emily hugged me tightly. "I'm just glad Titan was here. He saved us." I smiled, though I was still tense. Titan had been our unexpected hero, a reminder that sometimes help comes from the most surprising places. It was a lesson for the kids, too. Courage comes in many forms, and kindness to animals, neighbors, and friends can save lives in ways you never expect. After I checked the cameras and made sure the footage was safely stored, I surveyed the yard. The trench was deeper than I had realized, circling the house like a moat. The dirt was scattered, and the orange spray paint marked her plans for what she thought was permanent. But to me, it was a symbol of her desperation, her obsession with control, and her inability to understand the power of empathy and kindness. The morning continued, but the tension didn't fully leave. Emily and I took the kids inside, cleaned up the mud, and tried to calm them down. Luke kept asking questions about Titan, about Karen, about why people sometimes act so mean. I explained that some people are unhappy and try to make others feel unhappy too, but that kindness always matters, no matter what. As we finished breakfast, I realized something else. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Karen had escalated further than ever before, and the ditch was only the start of what she was willing to do. I glanced at the cameras again. The footage from this morning was clear, every angle, every scream, every yell, every flinch, and it gave me a plan. Because now I knew something else. Karen would strike again. But I would be ready. The next extreme event was coming. I could feel it in my bones. The morning after the ditch incident, the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. The sun rose bright and clear over Willow Creek Ranch estates, but the calm felt false, like the calm before a storm. Emily and I spent the day cleaning the yard, trying to erase the evidence of Karen's chaos. Muddy footprints trailed across the driveway, the trench remained a jagged scar around the house, and the orange spray paint marked her anger for everyone to see. The kids were unusually quiet. Luke kept glancing out the window, and Emma clutched her small stuffed rabbit, whispering, "What if she comes back?" I forced a reassuring smile, though inside, I felt the same unease. Emily suggested we take the kids to the park to distract them, and I agreed. It was important to maintain normalcy. As we got ready, I checked the cameras one last time. Everything had been recorded. Karen's wild expression, her yelling, the flailing board members, Titan's growls, and even the moment Karen nearly fell into the ditch. The footage was safe, backed up, and time-stamped. By noon, we were at the park. The kids ran around laughing, their earlier fears slowly fading. Emily and I exchanged glances, silently promising each other that we wouldn't let fear control our lives. When we returned home around 2 p.m., the mailbox caught my attention immediately. There was a small envelope sitting on top, marked with bold, black letters, "To the homeowner." My heart sank. I grabbed it cautiously, flipping it over. No stamp, no return address, just a thick, white envelope sealed with red wax. It felt old-fashioned, but that didn't make it any less threatening. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded in half. The message was simple, cruel, and unmistakably Karen. "You think you can humiliate me and get away with it? The ditch was only a warning. You and your family will see consequences soon. There are rules you can't escape. There are people who make sure I am obeyed. Be ready." My stomach twisted. The words were deliberate, meant to terrify. They were meant to remind me that Karen was still in control, or at least, that's what she wanted us to think. Emily gasped, "Benson, what do we do?" I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. We stay calm, we stay alert, and we keep watching. The next few days passed uneventfully, but the tension never left. I spent hours reviewing the footage from the cameras, planning contingencies. The trench was still there, a reminder that Karen's actions were escalating. I even started researching ways to reinforce our property, from locks to motion sensors to extra lighting. Then, one evening, the first less extreme event occurred, a small break-in attempt. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from monitoring the yard and dealing with the kids' restless energy. Around midnight, the security system's motion sensors triggered an alert on my phone. I grabbed it and saw a small figure crouched near the side gate, attempting to tamper with the lock. It wasn't Karen. She was too loud and brash for stealth. But it was someone acting on her behalf, maybe one of her loyal board members or someone she had convinced to do her dirty work. I turned on the outdoor lights. The figure froze in the beam, then ran off across the yard and disappeared into the shadows. No harm was done, but it was a warning, a smaller-scale preview of the kind of threats we would continue to face. The kids woke up at the noise. I reassured them, hiding my own tension behind calm words. "It's okay, just someone leaving. Titan's fine and we're fine. Go back to sleep." But even as they drifted back to sleep, I knew that the next extreme event would be worse. Karen wasn't just angry anymore. She was planning, calculating, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike again. That morning, I decided to reach out to neighbors quietly, the ones I trusted. A few families agreed to keep an eye on our property during the day, reporting anything suspicious. It felt like a small community army, a subtle yet powerful way to push back against the chaos Karen was creating. Emily suggested I write a detailed log of every incident: the ditch, the break-in attempt, Karen's threats, the camera footage. "If this escalates," she said, "we need proof, we need records, and we need to show them we aren't afraid." So I started a notebook, writing everything in precise detail. Every time Karen or her board members did something, I logged it with the date, time, and description. By the end of the week, I had pages filled. The warning from the mailbox was one of the most chilling entries, but the smaller break-in attempt reminded me that the danger was real, but manageable if we stayed prepared. Then came the day that changed everything. A neighbor called, voice shaking, "Benson, Karen, she's here, she's not alone, and she's bringing tools." I grabbed the camera feeds and peered at the street. Sure enough, Karen's car was parked across the road, and in the back of a truck, I could see multiple shovels, stakes, and even a wheelbarrow. Her face was set in that same furious expression, and the board members, 4 of them now, stood behind her, looking obedient and tense. My heart raced. This was no longer a warning. This was an escalation. Titan growled low from the porch, sensing the imminent threat. The kids huddled close to Emily. I knew that whatever happened next, it would be the kind of extreme event that could change everything. Karen was marching toward the house again, her group behind her, the tools ready. The ditch from last week had been a message. What was she planning this time? And just as she lifted the first shovel to strike, a loud crash echoed from the side of the yard. Something had moved faster than anyone could react. The extreme event of the day had arrived. The crash echoed across the yard like a cannon, making the kids jump and Titan bark with a ferocity that shook the porch. Karen froze mid-step, her shovel raised, eyes wide with shock. The board members scattered slightly, unsure of what had just happened. I gripped the binoculars and leaned closer to the window, heart hammering in my chest. Something or someone had struck with enough force to make Karen stumble backward, almost dropping the shovel. I couldn't see clearly at first. The sunlight glared across the yard, throwing long shadows over the trenches and the scattered orange paint markings. Dust and dirt kicked up in a small cloud, hiding the figure responsible for the crash. I held my breath, waiting. My mind raced through the possibilities: a neighbor's prank, Titan losing control, maybe even one of the kids running out to intervene. But then I saw it. A small, bright red cart rolling across the yard on its own momentum, tipped over just as it struck the edge of the ditch. Tools spilled out, hammers, stakes, and a bucket full of nails. The noise startled everyone. Karen shrieked and slammed her hand to her head, the sound of her anger almost as loud as her surprise. "What the hell?" she yelled, spinning around, trying to locate the source. I realized immediately what had happened. Luke and Emma, curious and brave despite the morning's chaos, had somehow managed to push their small wooden wagon, one they used for play, into the yard while Karen and the board members were distracted. It had crashed into the ditch and spilled the toys and garden supplies, making a perfect distraction. The kids were hiding now behind Emily's legs, peeking out, their eyes wide with excitement and fear. Titan barked again, stepping forward and growling, reinforcing the confusion. Karen was completely off balance, her anger, already palpable, mixed with panic. For a moment she looked almost human, not the all-powerful, controlling HOA tyrant, but a woman suddenly realizing she might not be in control after all. I didn't move. I stayed inside, keeping the cameras recording, capturing every reaction, every flinch, every yell, evidence, proof, and maybe even leverage. Karen yelled at the board members, "Pick up the mess, quickly, what are you idiots doing?" But it was too late. Titan blocked their path, snarling whenever anyone tried to get too close. The small chaos, the wagon, the tools, Titan, and the kids hiding behind Emily was enough to create a momentary paralysis. Emily whispered to me, "This is our chance. We need to get the kids inside completely and lock the doors." I nodded, signaling Titan to stay by the porch. I opened the front door slowly, motioning for Emily and the kids to move toward the safety of the house. Titan growled low, but allowed them to pass, his loyalty unwavering. The board members stumbled in their attempts to follow Karen's orders. One dropped a stake into the ditch, another tripped over a loose shovel, and the chaos escalated in a way that even Karen hadn't planned. Karen's scream rose above everything else. "This isn't over," she shouted. "You think you've won, but this is just the beginning." Her words were empty in the face of her own failure. The moment had shifted completely. For the first time, she wasn't in control. For the first time, her power, the power she wielded over the neighborhood, over us, was slipping through her fingers. I closed the door behind Emily and the kids, securing the locks. Titan settled by the porch, still alert, watching Karen and the board members fumble outside. The yard was a mess, dirt scattered, tools tipped over, the small wagon on its side, orange spray paint smeared across the trench. And yet there was a sense of triumph in the chaos, a message that she could not intimidate us. For the next hour, Karen and her group lingered outside, muttering to each other, their anger palpable but their plan disrupted. Titan's presence kept them at bay. I stayed inside, reviewing the camera footage, ensuring that every angle of the chaos had been recorded. Every scream, every yell, every flinch, it was all evidence that could protect us if needed. Emily and I took turns comforting the kids, explaining that bravery sometimes comes from unexpected places, like a dog protecting his family or a small wagon causing a momentary miracle. Luke and Emma were beginning to understand that courage could be quiet, clever, and even a little mischievous.